This interview was never meant to survive, to be burned like an ancient manuscript that terrifies those in power, hidden deeper than the secrets of the Vatican, and forgotten, forever. But it resurfaced. In an old archive, among scribbled formulas and yellowed letters, someone found something that defies explanation. This is not just about words. It is a confession, the final one, and perhaps the most dangerous of all ever spoken by the genius of the 20th century, Albert Einstein. According to legend, though what in this world is not a legend now, the conversation took place in the year 1954, 1 year before his death, in Princeton, in private, without witnesses, only an old tape recorder and a journalist whose name remains secret to this day. And here is what is astonishing. In this interview, Einstein does not talk about quantum entanglement or the theory of relativity. He speaks about the soul, about the fact that death is not the end, and about 5 simple facts which, if accepted, can forever change one's perception of life. You're still here? Then you are ready to hear what has been kept silent for decades. First, Einstein did not believe. He knew. Faith is for those who are searching. But I have found, he said then. His voice was quiet, but there was no doubt in those words. Consciousness does not disappear after death. It passes on, it transforms, but it does not die. Imagine a wave on the surface of the ocean. As long as the wind blows, it moves. But when the wind dies down, the water still remains. So it is with a person. We are not bodies. We are waves of consciousness that temporarily take on form, and then return to the ocean. This is no longer philosophy. This is physics, or more precisely, what begins where physics ends. Second fact, consciousness is the foundation of reality. Have you heard about the double slit, about quantum entanglement? All these paradoxes indicate that the observer affects the result, that without consciousness, the world itself does not exist. Einstein understood this long before it became fashionable to speak of a matrix or simulation. Consciousness is primary. It does not arise from matter. On the contrary, matter arises because someone is aware of it. If you feel goosebumps right now, that's normal. It means you're starting to remember, because deep inside you always knew this. You just didn't dare admit it. And now, pay attention. There is a third fact, and it may shock you. The third fact that Einstein spoke of, consciousness is connected beyond time and space. Have you heard of the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox? He asked the journalist. 2 particles, separated by kilometers, remain connected. This is not magic. This is a hint, subtle but frightening. If elementary particles can be linked, even when they are at opposite ends of the universe, why can't consciousnesses be linked, even after death? A pause filled the room. The wind outside grew stronger, and in that moment it was as if something in the air had changed, something invisible yet tangible, like electricity before a storm. Einstein continued, "The brain is not a generator, it is a receiver. Consciousness does not originate in it. It comes from outside. We merely catch the wave like an old radio station. When the body dies, the antenna breaks, but the ether remains, and consciousness continues to resonate." Fourth fact, there are levels after death. Yes, indeed, not hell and heaven in the religious sense, but vibrational layers, dimensions of consciousness. What is called after depends on how you lived the before, he said. The selfish, the cruel, the greedy, to what we conventionally call God. But this is not a person, this is an ocean, the merging of all living things, absolute silence and knowledge, without words, without forms, only light. And here, In this very moment, even the journalist, a rational, practical man, for the first time in the entire interview could not hold back his tears. He understood, everything we do does not disappear, not thoughts, not feelings, not pain, not joy. And now, the fifth fact. Death is not the end. It is a choice. Yes, you understood correctly, Einstein leaned forward, as if afraid someone might overhear. Death is a door. But beyond this door, you yourself decide whether to return or stay or dissolve into the source. This is not an automatic process. This is freedom. He called it the highest law. Free will, even after death, even outside the body. No one forces you, not karma, not judgment, not a god in a white robe, only you and your level of awareness. At that moment, thunder struck outside the window. Coincidence? The journalist lifted his head. He was no longer the same man who had entered the office an hour ago. In front of him stood not just an old man. In front of him, a gateway. And from that gateway, light was seeping. The light of truth, the one we have felt since birth, but were afraid to speak aloud. When he said those words, freedom, even after death, the journalist froze. There was a feeling that the space around them had slowed down, as if someone or something was listening in, not to the sounds, but to the meaning. Understand, Einstein continued, if humanity knew that everything it does, feels, thinks, does not disappear but is preserved like a trace in an invisible field, would it still continue living the way it does? The journalist quietly asked, "You're talking about the soul?" Einstein smiled faintly. That word is old, laden with myths, but essentially, yes, consciousness, freed from the body, a certain form that we cannot yet measure. But we can feel it. He turned to the window. A soft spring rain was falling outside, and it seemed the raindrops were tapping in rhythm with his words. Oh, how science fears this conversation. It fears not because it does not believe, but because it cannot control. Understand, truth is not just knowledge, it is a threat to power, a threat to religion, a threat to the economy. If a person understands that they are eternal, they will stop being obedient. The journalist trembled, not from fear, from revelation. A picture of the world was unfolding before him, the kind whispered by philosophers, nuns, dying elders, and children with unusual eyes. But now, it was Einstein who spoke, a man of formulas, a man of reason, and suddenly he fell silent. For a long time, a minute, maybe more. Only the ticking of a clock in the corner of the room. Then, slowly, as if selecting each letter, "Do you know why I decided to give this interview? Why? Because the end is near, for me, for an era. I feel that if I leave without speaking, something will close. Truth, it is like fire. If extinguished, it may never ignite again. And what I fear most is not darkness in the world, but in the mind." And then he said the phrase that the journalist later underlined in red in his notebook. The true enemy of humanity is not death. It is the forgetting of truth. He did not speak loudly, but every word emitted like a hammer to glass. And in that moment, according to the journalist, he felt an impression in his mind, not a thought. You must pass this on. As if someone invisible had said it directly into his chest, not with a voice, with a vibration. Einstein seemed to sense it. Yes, you must pass it on, but not to everyone, only to those who are ready, those who are seeking. The rest, it's too soon. They need another life, another turn of the spiral. He stood up, slowly, with effort. But we are not finished yet. "There is something I must show you, but only if you're not afraid." The journalist nodded. He already knew. There was no way back. Einstein turned around, opened a desk drawer, and took out a strange bundle. It was wrapped in black velvet fabric and tied with a pale, almost faded ribbon. Silence hung in the room, like before a storm. "What is that?" The old man didn't answer immediately. He carefully unwrapped the fabric and took out a thin notebook, yellowed pages. The handwriting, well, not his, more sweeping. In the corner of each page, the initials KG, Kurt Gödel. This is not just a collection of notes. This is a map leading to where reason ends, where return begins. He handed the notebook to the journalist. "Do you understand that if you reveal this to the world, everything will change?" "Yes." "Are you ready to be called insane?" "It doesn't matter anymore." Einstein smiled for the first time, truly. "Good then." He sat back down in his chair. His face was calm, as if he had lifted a burden from his shoulders, one he had carried all his life. When Gödel and I discussed the nature of time, we came to one terrifying realization. Everything has already happened. Everything that was, is, and will be exists simultaneously. It's just that our consciousness moves through this stream like a beam of light through film. We don't experience time, we scan it. The journalist didn't know what to say. And now imagine, if the soul exists outside of time, it sees everything, the past, the future, all of its incarnations, all of its lessons, and only then does it make a choice, to return or not, to continue learning or remain in the light. Einstein touched his temple. Some children remember the past. Some feel the future. It's not a miracle, it's a leak. In this system, sometimes there are faults, cracks, and through them, more can be seen than our world allows. He looked directly at the journalist. "You've felt it too, haven't you?" The journalist nodded, uncertainly but honestly. "You see, we all feel it. We just forget, or we're afraid to admit it." For a moment, the room became almost warm, as if the walls had disappeared. Only two people remained, and the great truth that stood between them, like the shadow of a star. And then, just when it seemed nothing could go deeper, Einstein said, "God is not a being, not a mind, not an observer. God is a field of pure consciousness, a field from which everything arose and to which everything will return. And when you die, you don't meet a judge, you meet yourself, without the mask, without fear, without illusions." The journalist flinched. He realized the final question lay ahead, the one everyone asks, but few are ready to hear the answer. He took a breath and said, "And if all of this is true, where is the proof?" Einstein didn't answer right away. He stood up, slowly walked to the window, and without turning, quietly said, "You ask for proof as if it were an equation, as if immortality could be placed on a scale. But truth is not always found in formulas. Sometimes it lies in what cannot be measured." He paused, then added, "Nevertheless, it exists. You just don't call it by that name." "What do you mean?" He turned, and his gaze was no longer that of a scientist, but of a man who had been there and returned to say, "When a person dies and describes leaving their body, that is not a hallucination. It's not a fabrication. Thousands of cases, hundreds of coincidences, confirmed by facts. People saw, heard, remembered, things they physically couldn't have known." He paused. "That's the first trace. The second, children who remember other lives. They name names, places, events, And it all checks out. They weren't taught. They couldn't know. But they remember. The third, the very phenomenon of consciousness. To this day we cannot explain how thought emerges from a piece of flesh. The answer is simple. It doesn't. Because thought is not a product of the brain. It is a signal received by the body. The fourth is you. Your feeling that there is something more. That intuition, déjà vu, inner voice. You didn't make it up. You are connected. You just don't realize it. The journalist asked again, "And the fifth?" Einstein came closer, his face now very near, and he whispered, "The very fact that you are searching is the fifth. You could have lived peacefully, believing that death is the end. But you're asking, you want to know. That means you already feel it, and that is the ultimate proof." The journalist swallowed hard. His hands were trembling. He understood. Answers are not something to be proven. They are something to be recognized. "You know what's the most frightening?" Einstein continued. "That truth isn't hidden. It's right in front of us. But we've turned away, because it's more comfortable to believe in finality than in responsibility. If death is the end, you can live any way you like. But if consciousness continues, then you are responsible for everything. For thoughts, for pain, for the good you failed to do." And then, in the silence after those words, the sound of a clock echoed in the room. Once, twice, thrice, as if the universe was underlining each sound, each meaning. The journalist stood up. He realized the interview was over, not because the questions had ended, but because the answers had already begun working within him. Pass it on, but don't argue, don't try to prove. Just let them hear it, and those who are ready will understand. Einstein shook his hand, and at that moment the journalist understood. He hadn't conducted an interview. He had received a message. The journalist stepped out into the night. The air was cold, but not harsh. He inhaled deeply, as if for the first time. Inside, not fear, not awe, something else, calm, and with it, the realization nothing would ever be the same again. He walked down the alley where the wind played with fallen leaves, but each of his steps carried meaning, as if even the ground beneath his feet knew. He had heard something that must never be forgotten. Behind him remained Einstein's house, a dim light in the window, a figure by the glass, and the feeling that this farewell was not an end, but a beginning. He opened the notebook, remembered every word, every pause, every glance. Death is not the end. It is a choice. It is a return. In his mind, Einstein's voice echoed, "Truth belongs to no one, not to science, not to religion. It belongs to the seekers." Weeks passed, then months. He didn't publish the interview. He kept it like a relic. He understood. It wasn't time, not yet. But one morning, it came. And he woke up with a clear thought. Now. This moment. The world had changed. People were searching. People were awakening. Some were afraid. Some were laughing. But some were ready. And if you've listened this far, that means you're one of them. Because deep in your soul you know it's true, not because Einstein said it, but because it resonates in you. You are not a body. You are energy, a stream of awareness, consciousness, an eternal traveler. And death is not the enemy. Death is a portal. Now you know 5 facts that are never spoken of on the screen. First, consciousness does not disappear. Second, it is primary. Third, it exists beyond space and time. Fourth, after death there are levels. Fifth, you choose what happens next. But the most important thing, you are not alone. Everyone who feels this, who hears the call, is part of a single field, that same ocean Einstein spoke of, and if any part of this touched you, leave your mark. Give it a like. Write what you felt. Share this video, not to prove but to remind. Remind those who are almost awake. Subscribe if you want to know more. There will be more stories, not made up, real, about a truth that whispered for so long and now speaks. And remember, we will meet again, where all paths converge. But for now, live. Not in fear, in search. Because truth doesn't shout, it whispers. The most important thing is to hear it.